Recording this now, and you are live.
Good afternoon, and welcome to Moving Forward, your leadership connection during these times. My name is Dr. Sheila Robinson. I'm the publisher and CEO of Diversity Women Media. We are an organization that supports the leadership and executive development of women of all races, cultures, and backgrounds. You know, we have taken pride in being a leadership connection to you, to our audience, our customers, for the last 15 years. And when COVID-19 came about, we knew that we had to continue to be there for you, and in a way that it would make sense. And so we came up with the weekly webinar series Moving Forward, where we will bring in special guests that will help us help you with, to increase your resilience and stay focused, productive, and positive, whether you're at home in your community and with your company, because these are some challenging times, and we want you to stay upbeat. We want those of you that are leading your teams to keep your teams upbeat and optimistic. And so we have a fabulous guest joining us today that will speak on the new reality of the Superwoman syndrome. Yum, I can't wait. Well, before I introduce the guest, let's see who is joining us today. Give us an idea of who you are and where you're from. If you go in the right bar, you click on drop down menu, all panelists and attendees. And I will say hello from Sheila. Laura from Chicago. It's sunny today. Glad you have sunshine, Laura. And anyone else who would like to share with us who's joining us? Oh, Svetlana in LA. Marilyn, am I pronouncing that correctly?
Svetlana, yes.
Svetlana. Carin from Bay Area. Rhonda and Samantha, so glad you're joining us. Alicia from Tennessee with Cisco, and Ms. Wiley from Baltimore. Camille from Miami. It's nice seeing people in Fort Lauderdale. I love it. I love it. Jackie with Dell Technology. Yes, I think that we actually are so hungry, connected to people like-minded, and that we have work, home, and community in common. And we are just so delighted that we do have this virtual platform to come together and share resources to help navigate these times. And we are going to get outside. And that's why we have named this Moving Forward. We move forward from the time we step out of our bed into the kitchen. We move forward when we go out and get essentials, but we need to move forward mentally. Women can't afford to take one step backwards. We can't. We've come too far. And so we want everyone to focus on how we can to take your destiny moving forward. As a woman here, just provide insights on dealing with the stresses of managing multiple priorities, the larger burdens that fall on women, juggling new roles at home. I will cover how to work from home. As a leader, the additional support you give your team. As a contributor, getting the work done and setting boundaries without damaging your career. And really, really important, how do we create and sustain? Before I turn it over to our wonderful panel, I want to get a fitting to introduce a new background, including 30 years in corporate executive, entrepreneur, her own consulting firm, Ready Aim, she's widely recognized in the field of diversity, who is visionary, innovation, accountability, trust, diversity and inclusion, and oversees talent management and development, recruitment, HR policy, and D&I initiatives. Prior to joining March of Dimes, Darlene served as the Chief Diversity Officer for United Way Worldwide. Her efforts expedited and advanced diversity and inclusion strategies, partnerships, and initiatives throughout United Way's footprints. And then our last panelist is Carin Taylor. She is the Chief Diversity Officer of Workday. Carin Taylor has global responsibility for the development and execution of Workday's inclusion and diversity strategy. Prior to joining Workday, Carin served as the head of diversity, inclusion, and innovation at Genentech, where she was responsible for strategic initiatives, including executive coaching, building and leading highly effective teams, and increasing employee engagement. She was responsible for creating the strategies to successfully recruit, develop, and retain diverse workforces as enabling large organizations to leverage diversity and inclusion to drive innovations. I have questions just from reading your bios. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Marilyn Nagel. Thank you all very much.
Oh, delighted to be here with Darlene and Carin. We're going to get started because we got wonderful questions from people who sent them in advance. And we have a lot to cover regarding the new Superwoman syndrome. What does that mean in today's reality? Everyone's talking about the new normal, and what is that? Is there even a new normal defined yet? And it keeps changing. So Carin and Darlene are going to talk about a variety of topics with us today. Let's start with the new roles that women are playing in the home. We know that most of us still do the larger share of home responsibilities. We take the larger share of that. So that means things like homeschooling kids. I just read an article in the Times that said 45% of men say they're doing a bulk of that. 3% of women agreed, which I thought was kind of cute. But, you know, there's no summer camp coming up. Being caregiver, providing support for spouses, cooking, cleaning, doing those things that we may have outsourced in the past and now have taken back. So let's start with you, Carin. Why don't you share a little bit about how you're handling all of these new things that are thrown on your plate, in addition, when you're wearing your Superwoman cape, to everything that you were doing before.
Yeah, thanks, Marilyn and Sheila, and good to see everyone on the call this morning. So the interesting thing is that we are now not just taking what we used to do in that 8-hour period called work. We are now taking all those things that you just mentioned and now combining those into kind of that same 8 hours, and we're trying to manage through that. So I have a parent of two, they're not really young, but a 17-year-old and a 23-year-old, and I have very different challenges than someone who might be a mother of small children. But with my kids, I have one, my 23-year-old, we moved her to Los Angeles earlier in the year, and she's back here now, you know, because there's nothing for her to do out there. She can't work. My 17-year-old is a high school graduate, and now we're trying to figure out how do we have some type of celebration for her. So we're all adjusting in different ways. But I think one of the things that is super demanding on me right now is the fact that, you know, I have about 10 direct reports. They all have children under the age of 10. And so having to deal with and help them manage through the additional stress from their perspective is something that's also kind of weighing on me as I think about this. But I also have to think about keep this all into perspective. And one of the things that, at least for myself, as I'm thinking about how do I deal with this, is really around self-care. How do I think about what's best for me at this particular time, whether or not it's exercising or releasing some of my stress through things like cooking, which I love to do. Trying to figure out ways how I stay sane in this period while juggling all these things. I think for me, and I think for many of us, this whole notion around Superwoman is real. And so, yeah, I think there's certainly going to be a good conversation today about some of the things that we can do to help solve for some of this.
Darlene, do you want to jump in? Anything that you can add to all the stuff that Carin's juggling? I know you lead people as well.
I do. And hello, everyone. And I'm very excited to be here today. So my scenario is a little bit different because I don't have little ones. I have an adult son who lives on his own. But I have a dog and a husband. So thinking, you know, just sitting here thinking about the challenges of working from home when okay, who's at the door? And the dog is barking and yapping, and the dog is under my feet. The dog is jumping up on my lap. And then other people in the house are coming and saying, well, where is this and where is that? And I'm like, I'm actually working. So it's trying to juggle all of those things. I tell you, one of the things that I do that helps to keep me sane in working in this new normal. And I heard this morning it was called the new abnormal. So it's not the new normal. It's really abnormal, is getting up as if I'm actually going to work and doing everything that I would do if I were going to get in my car and drive to work, right? And, you know, the full makeup, the hair, the everything, and then come into a room to say, this is the work day. And so I actually come down to my office down in the basement, and it's like I'm at work. And I do that because it keeps me in a schedule, and it keeps me feeling like I do have control over my start of my day and then the ending of my day, even though everything is kind of blurred all together. And I can tell you there have been times when it's just the two of us in the house, and I'll go upstairs and get well, what are we having for dinner? And I'm thinking, you've been watching cowboy movies all day long. And I've been working, managing a team, managing work, and you're still asking me what's for dinner. You know, so that Superwoman syndrome is real. It is very real. And really, I think it's how we then process that and take our power back from not thinking we have to be the Superwoman. I think that's a big thing, that we actually don't have to be the Superwoman that everybody thinks that we are. So.
And I think that leads us, and we'll talk a little bit more about all the stuff we're juggling. I was going to add that not only do we deal with all the children issues, we're also dealing with elder care issues.
Yes.
And I have to say, for me, my parents passed away a while ago, but I'm the one who has to remind my husband to say, did you call your mom today? You know? Yes. So yes. Even things like that, I think we still own or take on some of that responsibility. But let's talk about this notion of taking off the cape, not feeling like we have to always have it together. The idea, and we talked about this with the framework of covering, because so many of us, especially if we're leaders, feel this sense that we have to have it all together. And there are days when, I had a meeting this week with someone, and it was a 30-minute meeting with a rigorous agenda, and she just couldn't. That was the day the person I was meeting with said, it's not a good day for her. And we threw the agenda out, rescheduled, and spent that 30 minutes just talking about things like covering and coping. So share with us a little bit, whoever wants to start. Darlene, maybe you want to start a little bit on that, continuing in this notion of, some days we're barely hanging on, even if you get up and put your makeup on and dress for the office. Let's face it, there's some days when it's really hard to pull it together.
There are, and I have a dog barking in the background, so forgive me for that. There have been days where I actually enjoy going to work every day. I enjoy doing that. And so I've never been a big fan of working from home. But certainly I have, my entire team actually works away from where I work. And so people do work from home. Now, there have been moments when I've had a lot of energy to get up, and really you're on Zoom all day long. You're talking on Zoom all day long. And there are other days when it's just like, okay, I'm in the house and there's nowhere to go. I can go out in the backyard, but you're kind of afraid to kind of go places and do things that, you have that conversation of, okay, do you really need to go to the grocery store, or can you wait a few more days, right? And then you find everything is just blurred together. I did say to a friend of mine that being an introvert is helpful because you can spend a lot of alone time by yourself. But there are days when I've had a couple of days where it's just like, I don't know what's going on. I'm just not energized around it. And knowing as a leader how you do have to put that face on because other people are dependent on you to do that. So what I do, and I have a great team of people, and I've had people who said, why don't you just take a break? You know, just cut off and go sit out in your backyard, go sit out on the front porch and just kind of get some air, go take a walk around the block and come back. And having other people being okay with that and actually telling you to do that more so than us having to be the people telling other people to do that has been very helpful. Very, very helpful. So yeah, it's a lot. It
Yeah,
becomes a lot.
it is. It is. Carin, do you want to chime in?
Yeah, you know, because I think more than ever right now, we're trying to show how brave and how capable we are. We're trying to prove that, you know, we can multitask, we can do it all. We can be the breadwinner and the bread maker. And at the end of the day, we really can't. And not only can we not, we shouldn't be putting that persona out there. I think that now is a time for us to be really honest about what we can do, what we cannot do, and really try to set those boundaries and think about, you know, how do we let our companies, our managers, our peers, our family members know where we need help. Now more than any time, I feel like the need to make sure that I can ask for help is a time to make sure that I do that. So I really feel like, you know, it's better to say that I need support versus drowning in a sea on my own. So a few of the things that I'm trying to practice is be specific around the needs that I have. So if I need to say to my spouse, as an example, for these next 2 hours, you need to care for the kids because I need to be dedicated to this call, I'm asking my spouse that. If I need to tell my manager that I'm juggling multiple priorities and, you know, I need to show up to work at 11 today as opposed to 8, let your manager know what you need. Tell your peers that, you know, between 8 and 9, I can't do meetings because that's when I'm getting my kids on their calls so that they can actually get some education during the day. So for me, I think it's really important as we're trying to take on this persona of Superwoman, that we're also being super honest about what our needs are and not putting on the persona and pretending that we can do it all.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think we used to talk a lot about it's okay to take a sick day, but is it okay to take a mental health day?
Right.
Wow. This is an unusual time.
Yeah.
This is the new abnormal. And there are days, and sometimes it's a half a day, sometimes it's the whole day, when we want to crawl back under the covers. You know, we just want to just like, okay, I watched too much news last night, or someone I know is down with a virus, or whatever it is that's triggered us. It could be feel like a PTSD moment, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be that extreme. Do we have permission to say, I need to take 4 hours of just a mental health breather? And will our companies support us and our leaders support us in taking that time off and saying, I need to reschedule. I need to reschedule everything this afternoon and just go sit outside or do something that brings me joy. So I want to take a moment to just see if there's some questions coming in online to get some thoughts or suggestions from people that have been successful at doing some of this balancing, not having to cover as much as we used to.
Yes, we do have a few good ones, and one is in mental health. Do you have any suggestions for sustaining resilience other than work out and meditate? And I know people like, work out and meditate, but, some ways that they can sustain resilience. Another question is this, sort of question statement, Superwoman. Did we put that perception out there? And what can we do to, make it easier on ourselves? And then the last question I see that, are there any suggestions out there? And even if you have it on the chat, any suggestions out there to how do we get our kids in a routine when they're not used to going to school? And so how do we, get them in a routine? So there's mental health, sustaining resilience, besides working out and meditating, did we put the perception out there on Superwoman and anybody that can help on getting the kids, managing the kids?
You know, this is something I was thinking about it this morning, and I think it does speak to the perception that when people come to us and ask for our help, and many of us are always asked, you know, we're always finding ourselves as being the responsible one, right? Can you do this? Can you make this call? Can you do? And we always take that on because we want to be helpful. And then but on the flip side, we don't ask for the same help because we don't want to bother people.
Exactly.
You know, so it's always that feeling of, well, you know, I could probably do it myself. I don't want to bother that person. And I would tell you that I have a group of friends, and many of them are on this call. And they said to me one time, people want to help you and people get joy out of helping you, and you don't allow people to have that joy.
Right.
And it was one of these where it actually brought tears to my eyes, because it's like, that's not my intention at all. And I think that's what happens is we get wrapped up into, we have to be everything for everybody, and yet we can't ever be vulnerable ourselves, which causes that Superwoman syndrome to kind of just keep going over and over and over, which is why you need girlfriends, because girlfriends kind of knock you out of that. But it's something I think that happens at work too, that there are those people who raise their hand for every project and that will take every phone call and never step back to say, I just can't, because for some reason we think that we're less than if we say we can't do something. And you know, that's a myth. That's just not true.
I love that reframing, and thank you so much, Darlene, because I think it is a little bit selfish of us to think, you know, when we think we can do it all and we don't ask others for help, we are being a bit selfish. That notion, because it does bring joy when you help someone, you feel great. So we're depriving others of that opportunity to feel good when we don't reach out to others. And you are so right. Having women friends, because no one will tell you the truth or give you that tough love like women friends. Carin, let's talk a little bit more about resilience as we shift from topic to topic, as women do. Share a little bit more, some of the tips that you found to be incredibly helpful in terms of building not just your resilience, but sharing those things with others.
Yeah, let me start off with the comment around mental health, because we always think about people, other people having mental health issues. I think that right now we're all struggling with mental health. And I just want to put that out there, because even in your own little way, dealing with the stressors that are coming with having to deal with COVID-19 in this period, that has completely flipped our worlds upside down. We're all struggling in a different way to try to handle these issues. But you know, talking about taking that mental health day off, and for the managers that are out there and the leaders that are out there, if you're not doing anything else, now is the time to encourage your employees to take a mental health day off, or multiple mental health days. Remember, all of that stress that's coming on to people means that they need to release some way, and they need to feel like they have permission to do that. So make sure that you're encouraging things like that. I think there are a couple of other things that we can do in terms of just kind of resilience. I think we have to set boundaries. We have to set boundaries, and we have to let people know what we can take on and what we can't. We're all in very different situations based on the diversity of the home situation that you are in. Some of us are parents, some of us are caregivers, some of us don't have any kids at home, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we can take on more. It may mean that because I'm alone in my house or apartment by myself, I'm much more lonely than the person who may have a family support system. So I think it's important to recognize and understand that we're all coming to this from very, very different perspectives, and what may work for one person may not necessarily work for another. So I think from a leadership perspective, there are multiple things that we do, that we can certainly do. touch base with each one of your employees individually to figure out what their individual needs are. If your companies are not doing things like surveying their employees to really get a good sense of the sentiment of where their employees are now, I would encourage you to encourage your companies to do employee sentiment surveys so that you can get a sense of that. This whole notion around, video fatigue is real. I spend anywhere from 25 to 30, sometimes 35 hours a week on video calls. And I will tell you, by the end of the week, I'm done with video and I don't want to be doing any more video calls. So you've got to give yourself and your employees permission to shut off Zoom or WebEx or whatever system that you're using. Do things like go on walking one-on-ones so that you're not just still chatting, but you're also getting a form of exercise and movement and away from your computer, as an example. Make sure that you're not assuming that just because someone has small kids at home that they don't have an opportunity to maybe take on another project, right? Make sure that you're thinking about each and every individual as opposed to assuming that everybody is kind of dealing with this kind of in the same way. So, and then, kind of around setting your, just kind of back to, setting your boundaries, take time for self-care, whether or not that is meditating, exercising, simply taking a bath. And I mean, getting away from everyone.
Yep.
Give yourself that time to make sure that you're focusing on what you need, what your family needs, what those who are most important and close to you need to be healthy and successful right now.
Yeah. And I'm going to add in the idea of humor. We need, I mean, there are a ton of jokes out there about COVID.
Everything. About everything.
And toilet paper, and I have to say that I am not typically the person who likes to forward jokes. Right now, I think it's okay and it's perfectly fine. And I also want to underline the issues that you both raised, that every individual has their own set of circumstances and challenges, and we all have mental health issues and challenges right now: depression, anxiety, concern, sadness, fear, you name it. They are all out there. And as a family therapist, I know that, because I get calls from people saying, I just need to chat. This is a time when we need to be there for one another. Those people who we think of have less of a concern because they are living alone, think about the fact that no one is touching them right now because we're not touching people. So think about those things and how can we help and reach out and connect with them. Also, not just adding humor, but adding new ways. I love your idea, Carin, about walk and talk on the phone. Talking on the phone is now novel because everybody is on video chat. So do an outdoor walk and chat kind of a thing, even if it's doing a circle in your backyard.
We got a suggestion from one of our employees to do like a Wellness Wednesday, where you actually do a lunchtime Zoom call and everybody just gets on the call and they're having lunch, and you can put people in little chat rooms together to kind of meet. And it was like, wow, that's a really great idea. Not something you have to do all day because we're already on Zoom, but it's a different feel to it when it's just like we're having lunch together, or we're going to have a happy hour together, or you're right, we're just making a phone call. Like, we don't have to look at everybody every time we talk to them, right? Sometimes we just really we want to talk and just make a phone call. I mean, that's kind of gone out the door right now, but those are the simple strategies that are, that we kind of forget about, that this is what we used to do before we had Zoom. We used to just talk to people on the phone.
Carin, you were going to say something.
I was going to add just one more point about mental health. And that is, one way that I am trying to get, keep my mind straight is by shutting off the television. Shutting off the television. There is an overconsumption of negative information that is, for me, kind of like weighing me down a lot of the days. And so, whatever you can do to get healthy about, you know, turn off the TV. Don't look at the news every single day. Yep, catch up a few days. Things really aren't changing all that drastically. And so don't constantly feed yourself and your mind and your body and your soul with that negativity. Find ways to just wipe that stuff out. If you have friends that are texting you negative things all the time, shut it down. Remove yourself from that text string so that you can find other ways to surround yourself with more positivity.
Yeah.
But do watch comedy specials, and you know, people are binge watching a lot on Netflix and things like that. I say reserve evenings for lighthearted comedies or comedy specials. There's the new Seinfeld special out. I'm saving it for my weekend entertainment. Things like that help put us in the right mood before we go to bed, things like that. There was another thing that we talked about in terms of support for all the issues that we're dealing with. Many of our companies have EAPs. And one of you raised that. And I want to make sure that people know that you can tap into those resources for short-term support also. And that's free for most people. It's 3 to 5 visits and they're free. And why not, you know, leverage that if you can, if your company has it. So check out if your company has access to an employee assistance program, which is free mental health counseling. Usually it's 3 to 5 visits, and that can be very helpful also. I see we have a question in there. Employers who are stressing productivity, that you're managing homeschool and caregiving for a parent in the home.
There is revisit how to explain that to the employers.
Yeah. So share with us some of your tips. So not for the leader, but for those who report to a leader who's pushing, you know, we've got to get this done. We've got to get this done. How would you share someone raised to their manager? Hey, you know, I get the deadlines. I also have some challenges, without wanting to be rated poorly, without wanting to sacrifice your reputation or concern about damaging your career, especially given that many people are worried about layoffs in the future or layoffs right now. I think especially for women and women of color, everyone is concerned about, wow, if I push back, then maybe I'll be on that list for layoffs. So I just have to suck it up. So what advice would you give to folks?
You know, I think one is, and Carin spoke to it earlier, it's like you have to have the conversation with your managers. The thing about the space that we're in, you're not alone, right? So you're not the only person. I work for the March of Dimes, and you know, our focus is on moms and babies and the health of moms and babies. And so it is very important for us to think about the health of the people who work at the March of Dimes, because many of the people who work at the March of Dimes are moms and have babies. And so we also have to be very understanding of that. We have, there are lots of people who are, have taught before, and actually some of the employees are actually doing reading sessions for all the employees to bring their kids to the Zoom and do a reading session. And so things like that where everybody can be a part of it. But I think the biggest thing, and when you talked about EAP, you know, we also have had an EAP around how to manage your own self through this, but we also have one on parenting during this time and what does it take. So I think employers can do things for the employees who are parents, for the employees who do live alone and all of those kinds of things. It really is taking a deep breath. And I talk a lot about just having grace at this point in time, talking to your senior leaders. Don't be afraid to go to your senior leaders and say, I need help. I need help. I have a manager and I need to talk to the manager. Go to your HR team, go to your diversity team. All of those are people inside the organization that can help you process through all of this.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, you know, we're all going through this together. There is no rule book for there's not a rule book for your leaders, there's not a rule book for your managers, there's not a rule book for you as you're trying to figure these things out. This is new for all of us. These are definitely unprecedented times. What I'm going to go back to though is that being open and honest about where you're at, what you can commit to. I think if you want to show up as a really strong worker at this particular time, commit to what you can commit to and do that 100%, but don't overcommit and then do all those hundreds of things just 10%. That's where I think people potentially are going to start to potentially see an impact from a performance standpoint when they're oversetting expectations of what they can and what they cannot do. And so I would say make sure that you're being realistic. The other thing that I would say is go to your manager, or you can do this yourself and reprioritize what's most important and put the focus there. Everything is not equally important right now. Many of us are not essential workers where we have to be going into the office every single day. There are boundaries that we can sort of live by based on the situations that we're in. And so if you can talk to your manager about, look, I have these 10 things on my plate, I can only do 3. What's the most 3 important? That will help make sure that you consistently perform and then do those things really well. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think both of you have shared some great advice. I think it is always good to be able to say to your leader, in order for me to meet this new request that you have, I need to take something else off my plate, and I can't make that commitment. Or I can get this done by a certain date. I just can't get it done by tomorrow. And I think that has to be a reasonable conversation. You're right. Most of us are not doing open heart surgery right now, or none of us are doing open heart surgery right now, because those are pretty much not taking place. So we need to be able to talk about these things with our leaders. I see there's another question, and it's about giving advice for working from home with constant video meetings and having to manage small children who need homeschooling support. So I want to share one piece, and then I'm going to open it up to our panelists also. And that's that I heard an interview with the woman who is the head of the PTA for the country. And she said, and I've repeated this several times because I thought it had some power. She said, if your child is doing half an hour of schoolwork a day, whether that's reading or whatever it is, that might be it. And we might have to make this up, not this summer, but next summer. But don't worry about it, because there are children with special needs. Everybody is dealing with an unknown that we are not teachers. Most of us are not teachers. We're not trained as teachers. And we're trying to work while we're all of a sudden becoming teachers. And, I was trying to do this with my grandchildren. I said, don't sign me up for the new math, because that is not going to work for me. Let somebody else handle that one. I can keep them busy playing a game, but I'm not going to do that. We need to know what we can do. And again, this is another instance of, if you can't be the teacher, then say, okay, you know what? I'm going to do the best I can with my child's homeschooling, and it'll even out in the long run. You are not the only one in this boat. The same thing is true. You can say to your manager, your leader, I can't do meetings, as Carin, I think, or Darlene said earlier, between 8 and 10. That's when I'm doing my school work with my kids. So I'm blocking that time on my calendar every day. That is not going to be time that I'm working. But maybe between 7 and 9 at night, when my kids are doing some, puzzles or other things, I can go back and do some work. Or maybe not. Maybe that's just 2 hours out of my day that I have to devote to my kids. So I'll open it up for some other comments. I know we also wanted to talk a little bit about other things, in terms of being comfortable about working from home. So I want to add comments for any other comments from Carin or Darlene around these questions, and then we'll move on to some of the things about being more comfortable and feeling more normal about the whole concept of work from home.
You know, I'll just add real quick, and I think in all of this space that we're in, kids are very resilient. They're very resilient. We're not going to break them, you know, and kids learn. They're just sponges, and so they learn. So they're learning lots of things too in this time. They're learning how to set boundaries. If you have older kids, it's very easy to set boundaries for the older kids, like give me an hour and I'll be there. For the younger kids, just like, here's what we're going to do. And a lot of times the younger kids are even coming in saying, Mommy, are you okay? You know, I have one person where her daughter comes in, and I told her yesterday, I said, you do a great job of keeping this poker face when your little girl is like jumping up and down in the background. And what I do recognize, and I think what every person on this call should recognize, is that while we who don't have kids think it's wonderful that we see the kids in the screen, but for those who do have the kids, their probably stress level is up to here, because they're trying to maintain this, you know, I'm at work and I have these boundaries. And I think we just need to have grace for ourselves just as much as we have grace for all of those who are going through this. So, you know, that's the slogan on the wall: have grace, it'll be fine.
Yeah, just two quick things that I'll add, because I agree with you, Darlene. I think just two quick things. One is, I would say now you probably need to make a schedule, right? You probably have to make a schedule and stick to that. And this is where, to some extent, where our real superwoman or superwomen skills really come in. Schedule your day out, schedule your kids out, your kids' days out, see where there are overlaps, and then see where you have some flexibility. It's not, you know, when you have a mandatory meeting at 9 o'clock and your child is starting school at 9 o'clock, you've got to get creative around, do I sign on early? Do I sign my kids on early? How are you finding ways to kind of just manipulate that so that you can be sane? The other thing is, don't forget to ask for help, especially from friends and family. You can have friends and family who may say, hey, I'll do an hour or a 2-hour art project with your child or children while you're doing this important call. So don't forget to rely on them. And then just one thing I think from a manager perspective is, share the realities of what you were struggling with as well. Brings a human element to your employees so that they understand that it's not just them it's not just your employees who are struggling through this. Even you as a leader, you're struggling through it as well. And I think that transparency goes a long way right now.
I think that's critical. Let's talk for a minute about this whole notion. If you are working from home, and now that we are all doing that, and we are all physical distancing, let's talk a little bit about this notion of how do we balance that with this need for social connection. So some people are adding in, you know, cocktail hours. I love the idea that you said, Darlene, about just eating together for your teams at work. People are having virtual office hours where anybody can call me between, you know, 12 and 1. My office door is open, so to speak. You can pop in, or they're using a chat feature, or text me any questions you want. How do we start to reconnect or make sure that we don't lose those personal connections with one another? You know, we're doing driveway meetups and things that get us off of this visual platform and so much digital that we're doing between our kids on iPads and laptops, and us on our laptops and our desktops and our TVs and everything else. How do we make sure that we have some personal connection built into the systems?
Yeah, I mean, I think personal connections, especially when we think about kind of the mental side of the mental stressors of what we're going through, those personal connections are super critical right now. And so whether or not that's once a day, once a week, find that way to connect on something that has nothing to do with work. nothing to do with work whatsoever. And so I think that I think that those mental connections are super important. I think some ways that we can think about that are, can I call and just speak to a friend that I haven't spoken to in a long time? Can I send a message to, a sibling that maybe I have disconnected with, or a niece or a nephew? Those family Zoom connections are, for me, have been brilliant, because it's a way for us to get together, celebrate birthdays, celebrate anniversaries, do those things online. Any way that you can find to just completely disconnect from the normal sense that we're in right now, I would say certainly find ways to do that, to disconnect. Do things like a virtual paint and wine session, as an example, with your girlfriends at night, or do an exercise challenge, or play games with your kids. But whatever you can do to just kind of take that mental break off are kind of some things that I think we need to do, just to kind of continue to build that strong connection with people, because the physical piece of what we're missing is really playing a part, right? The fact that I can't hug my mother or hug my father right now is an additional stressor on us. And so whatever ways you can feel to do those connections, even if it's a wave through a window, certainly be doing that as much as you can.
Yeah. I think another thing is, just getting in the car and driving, right? You don't have to get out, you don't have to go somewhere, but just kind of drive there. We have a person on our team I think it was his granddaughter, it was her birthday, and all the family members did a birthday parade in the car. So they all decorated their cars with balloons and happy birthday, and they drove past the house, and and it was like, oh my God, that is like probably the most beautiful thing. And I said, but the bigger thing with that, it was beautiful for everybody in the neighborhood, right? Because that brought smiles probably to everyone who lives in that neighborhood where his granddaughter lives. So I think this is a time when, you can become very creative. We all have neighbors, and sometimes when we work all day, every day, we don't see our neighbors. And now we're seeing neighbors on the porch, and we're saying, hey, from across the street. And, you can still get close to communicate. You don't have to be right standing next to someone to still say, hey, come out on your porch and I'll stand on your grass, or I'll sit in my car and you sit in your car, and we'll talk. So there are lots of innovative ways to make sure we have that connection. But it is tough now. It is tough.
Yeah. My neighborhood, my street, everyone does Friday night wine. Bring your lawn chairs to a large area on the street where we can be socially distanced.
Yeah.
And it's especially good for the people who are living alone, but it's also good for all of us. We get to see each other in person, but 10 feet apart.
Yes.
The other thing that I've been doing, and I think is a nice thing, and I just saw CVS, they'll send you they will drop off, you can order cards online and peruse them, and they'll send them to you. But I've been sorting through all the old cards that I've collected. Along the way, I find a funny card and I buy it, and then I never send it. So I had this giant collection of cards. So I started sending them to people, just because I thought, well, that's not a bad idea. Or putting notes in neighbors' mailboxes. I did another Zoom webinar over the weekend with someone who does, they're called gratitude bots, where you paint on dominoes and you make a little bot and have a note that says, I'm grateful for you to healthcare workers. Nice. You can drop them in mailboxes or whatever. So I think there are ways that we have to start establishing new ways to make connections with people. The other thing is, with our teams, send thank you notes to people on your team. I mean, we don't typically do that. We don't typically acknowledge people on our team in a way other than just, oh, thanks, you helped me out. But why not send a note or a funny card? I'm a subscriber to Jib Jab, where you make these ridiculous videos and put your face in dancing videos, but it lifts someone's day. It's just because they look ridiculous and they're funny. And I used to just do them at the holidays, and I had elves, but now I do them all year long, and I send them out, and just they're fun. They're a little lightness. Do them with colleagues. They're inexpensive ways to make connections on a new way. Acknowledge, great job, really, miss seeing your face, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Those little connections make a big difference right now. So I want to ask for more questions. Sheila, you had something come in?
Yeah, okay, so I want to first of all let you know that we are 9 minutes away from the end of the hour. And so if you have questions, please do ask a question. But since we have you on, I would love to hear for you to share with us as you're hearing not only in your organizations, but other organizations that are starting to go back into the workplace. Do we have the right to say, hey, I am concerned what that's going to look like? How are you going to assure me of my safety? We need transparency leadership more so than ever. So could you all speak to, what we should do to prepare and ask for as we are told we now need to come back into the office and COVID-19 is still rampant?
Yeah. I mean, I think this is a great question, Sheila, and something that is weighing on the minds of everyone. Most of the companies that I know are putting together teams that are really looking at strategies for return to work. And I don't know any company, at least here in Silicon Valley, that's not thinking about a smart way to actually do this. So whether or not it is phasing employees back to work, or increasing the amount of time that people are allowed to work from home, or allowing employees to determine when they feel most comfortable about coming to work. I think it's going to be this, again, there's no rule book on this, but I think there's going to be a slow trickle versus one day, okay, everybody's back to work on September 1st. I just don't think the realities of what we're dealing with are going to be over that quickly. And I think many companies are starting to think about what's going to be the best way. What are all the elements that I need to think about? Safety in the workplace, community areas that we go in, sharing food. Are people going to be able to bring food into the office? How are we going to reconfigure our workspaces so that we're all 6 feet apart if we're not? A lot of organizations have moved to kind of the community workspaces. So what does that mean if I one day and have to use a computer and and you come into the next day and use that same computer or workspace? Is your company doing the cleaning that needs to happen for employees to stay safe? So I think companies are starting to already think about this as we are slowly starting to come back to how some of the things were previously. But I would imagine that most companies are out there thinking very strategically about what this is going to mean in terms of returning to work. And it may not be returning to the workplace. It may be that, I was talking to a last week, and they were saying that 35% of their workforce was already working remotely before COVID-19. Within 4 days, 93% of their employees were now working from home, which is like most of us. But as they're thinking about going back, they're thinking that it's probably closer to 50 or 60% of their workforce that should actually be working remote 100% of the time. So I think we're going to start to see these phased approaches and just different ways of thinking in terms of what it means to work. I also think, just lastly, is we also think about this, and many of our companies start thinking about hiring again and new talent, right? This barrier of location is not necessarily going to be a barrier anymore, because now if we've proven that we can work from home and be successful, talent will be coming in plethoras, right? Because we'll have access to much more talent.
Yeah. And then some are also doing, and all of the things she said were great, are doing staggering. So maybe you work every other week, right? So that you don't bring the whole entire workforce back in, but you have an A group and a B group, and they come in on different weeks so that you can give that space in the workplace, so that you can do the spread out. But the cleaning, that making sure that people have protective wear, making sure that offices and computers are cleaned on a daily basis, all of that is being taken into consideration. And right now there is so much information out there. It's almost overload about, you can join so many webinars where law firms are hosting webinars about what to do and how to think about it. consulting firms are doing the same thing. So there's a ton of information out there. And I think, like you said, most of the companies are having task force that are really focused on what this new thing is going to be. Our organization, we were already 60% working from home. And I think you're right, where people are saying, why do I have to come to the office when it's been proven that you can work from home? So it's going to be case by case by case. And I think, again, we have to use the data, and what is the data telling us? And we also have to respect our employees. When an employee says, I'm afraid, we have to respect that and figure out what strategies can we do to support our community, because we don't want to put people in dangerous situations.
And I think that's a really critical point to underline, Darlene, and that is that people need to be comfortable raising their own concerns. It's very different for a knowledge worker than it is for other types of workers. Yeah. And so, the perspective of people in knowledge working professions is going to be different than people who are working in stores, people who are working right. in consumer companies. But I think that it is important for everyone to feel comfortable raising concerns individually and collectively, to say that my health and my safety is critical, and I need to earn a living wage. So it has to be a both and kind of solution. I know that we want to make sure that we touch on the fact that whatever we do as we go forward, that what we're saying essentially in this notion of not needing to be superwomen, leveraging the skills that we as women have, but recognizing that we don't have to be the superwoman, that we can ask people for help. We should ask people for help, give them the chance to contribute, but also know that with resilience and grace and empathy and compassion toward ourselves and toward others, we will get through this. We are getting through this. Yeah. We are leveraging our superpowers, even if we don't have to shoulder it all. And that's really the message that we've been working to convey to you all today. We don't have the answers. You all have some answers. We have some thoughts and suggestions, but the idea is we don't have all the answers because this is all unknown. We're forging new territory together, but we feel like with grace and empathy and forgiveness and understanding that we're figuring it out as we go, and we're going to be kind to ourselves and kind to each other, that we will get through this together and figure it out. And as women, we will share with one another what we learned and make it happen.
And so before we close, I just want to share to everyone on the call, we do have one thing to look forward. We have to look forward getting on the other side of COVID-19. We have to look forward that we all are creating a community of women that need each other more so than any time. And so what we're going to look forward to is getting through this, and whatever you do, keep moving and moving forward. And when we get on the other side of it, we're going to have the biggest event, person-to-person event, that we're all going to come together, and we will be able to hug again. That's what we can hold on to, that we will be able to connect physically, and we will be able to hug again. And so I'm going to let the last words come from our moderator and our panelists. Any lasting words that you want to leave with this group?
Sure, just a couple quick things. Connections are critical. Empathize with the people around you. Be supportive of others. Be honest with yourself and others, and certainly be respectful and forgiving.
Yeah, I like those. I would say use this time to be creative, to be innovative. Use this time to learn. I mean, there's so many things that are just free to learn. So use this time to retool and reskill yourself, and respect and honor who you are. Like, put yourself first as well as putting everybody else first.
You're in our hearts, and we'll get through.
Well, until next week, please keep moving forward, and we'll see you then. Thank you so much, Marilyn, Carin, and Darlene, and I'll look forward to connecting with you in another arena. I wish you all a farewell and great day.
Thanks, Sheila.
Thank
everybody.
you.